Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Dopefish Productions Reviewer, where we review anything that catches our fancy or interest. Today's review is Naruto Lunar Eclipse by Thayerblue1. And here's the summary, my viewers. After losing the war against Madara, our heroes wake up 10,000 years later in the Star Wars Old Republic period. That is a very basic summary, but it gets the job done. This story will be getting this fanfiction will be getting a 5 out of 10, mainly because this story suffers a lot. Every mistake all his other stories suffered from, this story suffers a times 3 multiplier applied upon them. But I think this is one of his first stories that he wrote, if I remember right. So that can be somewhat forgiven, but when you first begin to read this story, you quickly realize you have to pay attention to every detail in this story, or you will get lost relatively quickly. And that's not an understatement. But you can't say it's a bad story because of that. There are several points in the story that just feel rushed to an incredibly bad degree, and there are other points that just feel like they don't really belong in the story. They just added them to add words to the chapter. Though I'm not really saying that's a bad thing, it's just it feels that way in certain sections. Then there are times where he throws away far too many OCs to make it a healthy story and what you can say a good story. A lot of OCs that he introduced for like a chapter or 2 chapters at most, sometimes 3 chapters they appear. Um, you fall in love with that OC, and then he just throws that character away by killing him, or they just go off screen and never return. That's type of things that happen that really threw me off of the story at multiple points. I had to constantly come back to the story to even come to current of the story, just because it got hard to read because of that, and also most of the Naruto characters didn't fully blend in with the Star Wars universe. Um, Not to say Naruto really blends in with the Star Wars universe, period, anyway. Unless he grows up into it, then he somewhat blends in. But overall, it's uh, it's hard to say everything that's bad about it. This story is the only story in his category that does not suffer from the zero side character or zero world building element, because this story is entirely world building. He tried to make his own universe in the Star Wars universe with Naruto characters in it. That's how it felt when you're reading this. His other stories could use minor things from this story to improve his other stories, but overall, this is has to be his worst story that he wrote, but this is his first story, if I'm not mistaken. So that can be very much forgiven. I will tell the truth. I have written tons of stories that I do plan on putting on fanfiction and a few other sites, if I can remember them at a later time. And 80% of my original works were absolutely atrocious that I probably won't even attempt to put them on fanfiction because they're just so horrible I don't even want to touch them. But This guy's works are very well made and very well thought out. His first story, it just felt like it's one of those stories he probably picked up a book at school or somewhere and just wrote it down and then immediately put it here on fan fiction. And then a few years later, he retooled it by improving a few dialogues here and there to make it more readable. And that's probably actually what he did. Because it says it was retooled for dialogue reliability. Um, Overall, it's a story I would recommend people who are huge fans of the Star Wars Old Republic period and Naruto fans. But besides that, it's not going to get that high of recommendations to read. But it's a worthy time waster. And if you do read it, I recommend reading it in short and reading the entire story as fast as you possibly can. Because if you get up and walk away from it for a couple of days, you will return and read the next chapter and be kind of lost in certain areas in the story. Because every time he goes to a slight different arc in the story, if you can even say it's a different arc, it's more like a different planet. Um, it just feels like you lost something. Like, what happened to this person, or what happened to that person? It's just, it goes like that. You get completely lost if you walk away from this story without finishing what that current arc was or planet was, and not going to a proper stopping point in the story. It's just, uh, it's hard to read these type of stories while perfectly paying attention. But I really recommend it be read, and thank you, viewers, for coming to the Fish Productions reviewer, or review anything that catches our fancy or interest. See you later.